Indiana moves to align immigration enforcement with federal policy. Hoosier students walk out, the state and schools respond. And a longtime member of the State House GOP steps away. From the television studios at WFYI Public Media, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending February 6th, 2026.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by Par Ritchie.
Indiana lawmakers overhauled an immigration bill to align with the Trump administration's immigration enforcement policies. Samantha Horton reports on hours of passionate testimony on the issue.
The amended version forces state and local law enforcement compliance with federal immigration officers, adds reporting requirements for immigrants receiving welfare benefits, and gives the Attorney General more enforcement powers. Save Heritage Indiana co-founder Nathan Roberts says he's in favor of the bill that he believes helps address illegal immigration in the state.
It will make Indiana the model for common sense immigration enforcement throughout the country.
But many who stood at the podium urged lawmakers to vote against it. Noblesville resident Kumba Kebe says the legislation goes against Indiana's Christian values.
How can we claim to be pro-life while supporting the inhumane treatment of immigrants in this country?
After more than 4 hours of testimony, the House Judiciary Committee passed the amended bill.
Is Indiana on the right track with immigration enforcement? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Terri Austin. Republican Mike O'Brien. Ben Thorp, government reporter at WFYI. And Oseye Boyd, editor-in-chief at Mirror Indy. I'm Jill Sheridan, managing editor at WFYI. So, Mike, is this the right direction for the state of Indiana?
Well, look, I mean, we're picking our moment here at a weird time. At a time where it feels like we're in an inflection point on this. Even the White House is starting to soften their stance on coming out of Minnesota, what they're doing and how far they're willing to go, and are they changing these policies? And now you've got Congress taking another look at the spending bill, and the leverage point is DHS funding and how should we reform ICE to make it more accountable and more transparent and soften the approach here. And so and then we find ourselves in the middle of trying to double down. It's like the belt and suspenders approach here, right? Because saying that we're going to follow federal law isn't a thing. That's what we do. We follow federal law unless they're quiet about it. Then we follow state law, right? So, and they're not quiet about immigration policy, obviously. So. We're in an interesting moment. And you put that in the political context. The filing period ended at noon on Friday, so now we are fully into campaign season for a lot of these people. And this issue is going to be the polling has got to show that this is not going well for the administration, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, which is back off, pull everybody out of Minnesota. They dismissed the director. They said that was unrelated, which was cute, but. So we're at an interesting pivot point here. It's like the last time we had immigration front and center in U.S. policy, really, in an election year was certainly the last one, 2024. But 2006 was the last time that Republicans really proactively pushed immigration reform, and that was back when we had some common sense. Remember, Dan Burton carried the amnesty bill in 2006. He carried George W. Bush's amnesty bill. Think about how far removed we are from that conversation. Right. And then we lost the election in 2006 and never looked back on doing what we're doing now. So we'll see how it turns. I mean, ultimately, I think the national environment is going to impact the election far more than this bill, but it's a doubling down on what's going on.
I mean, Terry, we do see this bill being heard again next week in front of lawmakers, and Democrats will be proposing a number of amendments. What do you think they will try to achieve?
Well, I think they'll try to soften the bill. I think they'll try to reclaim local control. And there's an argument for that because local law enforcement knows their communities, knows their neighborhood, knows their residents far better than bringing in folks from the outside. It'd be like bringing in somebody as a new lobbyist to the Indiana General Assembly to tackle one of the biggest bills of the session or even of the year. And they don't even know the players. They don't know the routines. They don't know.
That happens a lot.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So I think that you'll see that the Democrats will try to soften this bill, and some are going to be outright opposed to it. But I'm surprised that AIM, Indiana, Accelerating Indiana Municipalities and others have not gotten involved because it could erode local control significantly.
Ben, with this legislation, we've heard last year as well that was proposed a little bit of not accord with amongst Republicans in the State House, but now we're seeing a little bit more togetherness here. What did you understand when you were listening?
Yeah, so you heard from kind of Sam's reporting that the amendment in the House is making this thing a little bit stricter. People have pointed out it's also looking a little bit more like a piece of legislation last year that ended up dying because Senator Liz Brown, who's the author on this current bill, decided not to hear it. Now it appears that Senator Liz Brown and Attorney General Todd Rokita are kind of working together to get this across the plate. But I think the question is, when this heads back to the Senate, are senators as a whole going to go for this?
Yeah. And Oseye, we did hear much testimony from people that seemed almost resigned that something like this would pass in the House. What do you think a lot of advocates and community members are feeling around this legislation here today?
Well, I think there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of what's happening in Minnesota can come here. We've seen recently where we have all these social media posts about we see ICE. ICE is on 38th in Illinois. ICE is here. ICE is going to be at the JW. All these rumors about what's going on because people are afraid. People are afraid that their neighbors will be taken. Kids taken out of school. There's a lot of fear. ICE has already been here, as we know, but people are afraid of what's going on in Minnesota will come here at a time, like you said, where actually things are being pulled back. But it does, I think part of the conversation has to be, yes, something does need to be done about immigration. I think all people with common sense, to Mike's point, can agree that there needs to be something done, but it has to look humane. Right now, it does not look, it looks very inhumane. It looks very much like we do not care about people as being human beings. The language oftentimes is alien, illegal alien versus you're a person. And so that gives people feel like that makes you be able to be treated as such. And I think that's where we need to soften and actually remember, to the point of the woman in the video, we're supposed to be Christians here. This doesn't seem very Christ-like.
This bill does align with what Indiana's AG wanted initially last year and does give the Attorney General more power here. And it's something that federal officials as well have said this Fairness Act is what they would like to see. Will this give Todd Rokita some more leverage? Oh, definitely, and he'll use it too. He's tested the limits of that office in good ways and not. The politics are really interesting because the reason Liz Brown has a primary is because Jim Banks and Todd Rokita teamed up to argue that she wasn't conservative enough. So now she's fighting this primary back home, but now doing a solid for the Attorney General is just an interesting dynamic. We've seen as well, some of the testimonies, schools saying there's gaps here and that people could be falling through these gaps with this type of legislation, that it might be too broad. Is that a concern, do you think? Well, it is, and I think schools and churches should be off limits. You don't go in and terrorize children. I mean, because it's not just whether you're going after someone you think a child may be here illegally with their parents. You do that kind of stunt in a school, it terrorizes every kid. And kids don't learn well, I'll say this as a former teacher, do not learn well when they're fearful, unsafe, hungry. We'll be watching. Speaking of students, at multiple central Indiana high schools this week walked out of class to protest federal immigration enforcement. Eric Weddle reports the movement is drawing sharp criticism from state GOP leaders.
No fear, no hate, no ICE in our state. No fear, no hate, no ICE in our state.
State education officials and some Republican lawmakers are pushing back. The Indiana Department of Education says it does not support any student walkout, as class time must be focused on learning. The department says districts should enforce discipline policies for student conduct and attendance. Republican State Representative Jake Teska called the walkouts highly orchestrated indoctrination led by adults. Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith says it's unacceptable schools are letting students protest ICE. Students say they are not worried about being disciplined. Speaking out for their immigrant classmates is more important.
So, Terry, do students have the right to walk out?
That's a great question, and I will say it's not the first time, and it will not be the last time that students have chosen to protest. It's gone on for decades. Those of us who remember the Vietnam War remember when kids came out of high school to protest that. Kent State. I mean, so many things through the years. The issue is for schools. You don't want kids to be hurt. You don't want them to be subject to retribution. The General Assembly is going to have to learn some patience, quite honestly, in my view. Students are going to do things that they feel helps give them a voice. Schools would be wise to find a way to give them a constructive avenue to protest this. And it's just the nature of the beast. You get a lot of students, when you think about schools having 3,000 kids in them, that can spread like wildfire. We're going to do it they started on social media. And that's why these things, I think, have really started to ramp up over the last few weeks, because it's like, well, if their school's doing it, our school's going to do it. It's not basketball competition, but nobody wants to be left on the sidelines either.
Mike, why do you think there was so much outrage from GOP leaders about these walkouts? Because certainly they've happened before.
Yeah, it's a high-profile example of pushing back on a policy they support. My daughter's a junior in high school, and she asked me if she could participate in the AVOD walkout. And I said, look, I'm not going to tell you can do it when school leaders are saying you shouldn't. But part of being young and protesting stuff is telling people like me to go pound sand. And I have a hard time, she looks at me as a person who's made his whole life about getting on TV and mouthing off about stuff and sharing my opinion. So, and she tracks me a little bit in that she is forming hard, we disagree. We had a conversation last night about this after the protest and shared opinions there. So, look, I mean, part of that is, and actually in the hallway of the state, the halls of the State House this week is this conversation. A lot of us have kids in the same situation, right? Mm-hmm. And we're recollecting, we're all politically active, so we're recollecting the protests that we participated in, when we were kids, and we look back and we're like, boy, that was this is stupid. But we look back sometimes and go, wow, that was I was wrong about everything. Or I got lucky and didn't get arrested.
Well, we have been seeing schools respond differently, and schools have the right to, punish students if they do walk out.
That's right. One of our colleagues was reporting on, it's perfectly legal for a school to punish students for going out and engaging in kind of a disruptive protest or a walkout, something of that nature. I think protests by their nature, as we're kind of talking about, are meant to be disruptive, to draw attention to an issue. I think the question is how far do schools want to go, and how far do lawmakers want to go in kind of pushing back against kids? And do you want to be seen as kind of pushing back against kids? You've got folks like Micah Beckwith, who I think are saying, I don't want to see this. This is making me uncomfortable. I don't want schools to be kind of behind or supportive of this kind of walkout or protest. But on the flip, I think it's just it's a tightrope to walk here. Speaker Todd Houston was talking about it this week, and you heard him say, I think that this is a mistake, but I'm also really glad that our students are so politically active and they're getting out there and they're making their voices heard. And so I think it's going to be hard for places to be seen as really coming down on kids.
I mean,
it's not going to work.
No.
Has it ever worked?
No. Never.
Not any one time? Or has it made it worse?
It's going to make it worse.
So, what do you think, Oseye?
Well, it's to the point earlier that kids have been doing this for generations, for decades, right? And when the old people don't want to do something, they're going to make them want to do it even more. But there's this word indoctrination being used a lot, that they feel that kids are being indoctrinated. Well, it depends on, that word is often used when you don't agree.
They're clearly not.
Well, no, they think the left, they're being indoctrinated by the left, I think, when they don't agree with what the kids are doing. They're using the word indoctrination. But then you're trying to have Turning Point USA in school. So some people might think that's indoctrination. So it just depends on who's saying it, who's using it. And if you like what the kids are doing, you're fine with it. But if you don't, it's a problem. And we just have to understand the youth are going to act like they want to act no matter what.
Let's time now for viewer feedback. Every week we pose an unscientific online poll question. This week's question: should Indiana students be allowed to walk out for organized protests? Answer yes or no. The last question posed to viewers: should Indiana lawmakers prioritize the expansion of National Guard policing powers? 12% saying yes and 88% saying no. If you would like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Indiana State Representative Ed Clear says he's been kicked off the House Republican caucus days after announcing he would not seek re-election and would run for mayor of New Albany as an independent. April Rickert reports Republican House Speaker Todd Houston confirmed the change, but said Clear's committee assignments will not be affected.
Clear was first elected to the House District 72 seat in 2008. But he's not pursuing a new term this year. Clear says he can't in good conscience continue to run as a Republican and that the party itself has become, quote, unrecognizable under President Donald Trump. He says his decision isn't about the people, but the party. He plans to run for mayor of New Albany in 2027 as an independent.
So, Ben, was this move a surprise?
I feel like the answer is yes and no. I think like on the one hand, you look back at Clear's record and he's someone who has been comfortable breaking with the Republican Party going back to 2011. He was the sole Republican to vote no on a constitutional amendment that would have banned gay marriage. You can look at his support for things like the needle exchange program. He's been a Republican who I think has been comfortable breaking with the party. And so in that sense, I would say, no, it's not a surprise. But I think that it is always surprising to see someone break with the party, and particularly to say that they're breaking with the party over Trump. I think that is something here in the state that we're seeing a lot of consequences for, whether we're talking about the swatting attempts, whether we're talking about the primary challenges. It's something that comes with consequences. And so I think that in that sense, it's always surprising for someone to say, here's why I can't sit with this anymore.
Oseye, do you think this is influence of DC politics?
Yeah, I think people are getting tired of people from out of state coming in and trying to dictate what happens in Indiana. I think we'll see more pushback on that. And it's really, I think for me, it's good to see that, because for so long we've talked about how Indiana is not DC, it's not New York, it's not California, and we make our own decisions here. And so it seems like we're getting back to that. So local control.
Terry, he was known to work across the aisle. Will that be missed at the Indiana State House?
I think so, because, it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of many legislators, current and past, who believe the tone has changed significantly. There were speakers who discouraged people from going to dinner together, Democrats and Republicans, from working together. Ed has always been, Representative Clear, has always been a compassionate, decent representative. But most importantly, and this gets back to, do you toe the party line? Do you represent the people who elected you? Ed has tried to represent the people who he represents down in New Albany. And he's been very popular down there, very popular. They've tried to beat him before on both sides. They cannot get it done.
Mike, are we at risk of seeing this happen more in the Republican Party in Indiana?
I don't think so. I think it's more likely we're going to see a shift after 26. We'll see what the outcome of the election is, and that's going to determine what the tone is in 28. Do we stay on this kind of Trump path, or do we lose? If we lose, do we try to pivot away from it? And who's the next person? As far as Ed goes, the Representative Clear goes, Terry's right. He picked up a lot of issues that Republicans weren't willing to pick up. He's picked up a lot of social service issues, the syringe exchange, a lot of things that he was very moderate on, but also, take it out of the political kind of ideology standpoint. He was just trying to his passion was taking care of people who were the most vulnerable. That's what he did. And that was every year. Is it a surprise that he was removed from the caucus? I'm kind of with Ben. I'm like, yeah, you couldn't have just run the clock out for 4 weeks, but also you kind of went on TV and said, I'm not a Republican anymore, and you're not allowed in the Republican club, and you have to be the room, literally the Republican room. But I think the speaker struck a good balance in not allowing him to caucus with the Republicans anymore, because he said, I'm not part of you, I'm not one of you anymore. But keeping him as a Republican on those committees where he's making a difference.
Is that a surprise, or is that a pretty typical thing that would happen? You know, you're not in the caucus anymore. We've seen it locally happen.
I mean, people have been ejected from the caucus for cause, like Mike Young doesn't caucus with the Senate Republicans. Mike Delph, who just filed for Senate yesterday or Thursday, to run in the seat that J.D. Ford is vacating, who beat him years ago. Was expelled.
Dean Young used to
expelled from the caucus.
Dean Young used to not go to caucus with the Republicans. He would say, and I was
Dave
a new
Wolfson didn't either, but that's just because he didn't want to go to caucus.
Do we see that as much happen in the Democratic Party?
This doesn't really happen.
No, all their fights just happen inside.
Well, another issue at the State House this week. People who are homeless and camp outside could face criminal charges under legislation being proposed. Homeless advocates are concerned that the move will add extra barriers without support for the unhoused. For a second year in a row, lawmakers have advanced a bill that would establish misdemeanor charges for camping outside on public property. Supporters of the legislation says it offers a chance for law enforcement to engage and connect people with services. Opponents worry it adds another significant barrier for people experiencing homelessness. Lauren Murphy, policy analyst at Indiana Community Action Poverty Institute, says the bill does not provide communities with any additional support services.
Those might not exist depending on where they're at. They have to get set up. That costs money and time. This bill will be enacted in July 1. And so I'm very concerned about what is going to happen if there's not services.
The legislation is now before the House. So, Oseye, last year, many people at the State House railed against, this type of legislation. Do you expect that we could see that type of opposition again?
Yes, if there's time. This is a bill, again, going back to treating people humanely. This bill does not sound humane. Calling it camping is something that I've kind of taken, it's living, it's not camping. We're not going there for fun. People are living outside. They're living in freezing cold conditions. It's not something that most people are choosing to do because they want to. It's something that they are forced to do. And penalizing them, making it criminal, misdemeanors, fines, that makes it more difficult for people to actually go into housing. We know we're having an affordable housing crisis right now. So how are we helping to solve the affordable housing crisis? By putting people in more situations where they can't get housing. Then we know that there's crowding at the jail. So what does this mean? What does this mean? And then I think the bill was talking about letting them, they have to move like 300 feet. What does that really do to move 300 feet? I'm just going to move a little bit down the road here, and then you're going to come and get me again in a couple more days. Like, what does that really do? It's just kind of kicking the can down the road here. We need real solutions to this affordable housing crisis that we're in versus criminalizing people for not having a home.
Ben, the author of this bill, has said that she really does want to, make connections for these people. But again, some people worry that the services aren't there.
Yeah, you heard kind of Cindy Carrasco say in committee that, to allow someone to die on the street is not humane, and kind of making the pitch that this bill is helping solve this. But if advocates have said for years, and Jill, you and I have been covering this for many, many years, that, pushing someone somewhere else does not solve the problem. If the problem is that they don't have a house, telling them to go somewhere else is not ultimately like a solution to that. Indianapolis has been one of the cities across the country that is looking at this housing first model, where we're trying to get people into housing immediately. I think there are questions about how fast the city is moving and whether or not it's doing enough. But yeah, I think that it's clear that this is an issue, and that people on both sides don't want to see people on the street. But I think it's just a question of, do you want to make that someone else's problem or push it outside the city, or is there a solution that we can kind of actually come to?
I mean, Mike, we've heard from people that have proposed this bill that the reason is because the methods that we're using now are simply not working. Homelessness is on the increase, and that's true, but there have been municipalities that have been able to tackle it in ways that we have not been able to here. Is this way, creating a misdemeanor charge for people who are camping outside, a good way?
I don't know. Enough bad stuff's probably happened leading up to that point that you're not worried about the misdemeanor, but I'm not sure hanging a criminal record around their neck is helping anybody either. But look, I mean, lawmakers are they live here, right? Like 3 or 4 months a year they live here, and they walk out of the State House too and see people living under the Arts Garden, and a lot of this gets lumped into the same like category when it's more nuanced than that. They're reacting as much to the homeless encampment as they are to the guy shooting up on the street outside of the State House that they see, and they're trying to solve both of those problems with the same solution, and they're different. And so I do agree. You do have to bring, if you're going to encounter, if the government is going to encounter these people, something has to come along with that, which is a path to services, a path to something better than the situation they're in now. Because if I'm living in a tent under a bridge, I'm not too worried about getting a misdemeanor charge. I wouldn't think. I'm just speculating.
Well, that's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel has been Democrat Terri Austin, Republican Mike O'Brien, Ben Thorp, government reporter at WFYI, and Oseye Boyd, editor-in-chief at Mirror Indy. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at wfyi.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Jill Sheridan, managing editor at WFYI. Join us next time because a lot can happen in an Indiana week. The views expressed are solely those of the panelists.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations. Additional support is provided by Par Ritchie.